Story 1. The rest area where your reflection ages faster. The bathroom mirror at the Missouri rest area showed me with white hair and liver-spotted hands at 2:47 a.m., even though I'd checked my appearance in my truck's mirror 5 minutes earlier and seen my normal 32-year-old face staring back. I touched my actual hands, smooth young skin, while watching the ancient version of myself in the reflection touch his withered hands in perfect synchronization. Our movements identical despite the 60-year age gap between reality and reflection. My name is Kyle Morrison, and I'd been driving the I-70 corridor between Denver and St. Louis for 6 years without encountering anything stranger than bad coffee and bathroom graffiti. This rest area looked standard when I pulled in. Well-lit parking lot, clean facilities, the usual mixture of truckers and families making overnight stops. I'd used these facilities dozens of times, but tonight something had changed. Something fundamental about how mirrors worked here, about how they reflected not what was present, but what would be present, showing futures instead of presents, revealing endings before beginnings. I stepped back from the mirror, then forward again. The reflection matched my movements perfectly, but maintained the aged appearance. White hair thinning to baldness, deep wrinkles carving canyons across features I recognized as mine but transformed by decades. Eyes clouded with cataracts, posture bent by years of sitting in truck cabs, shoulders curved forward, spine compressed. I was looking at myself at 90-something, seeing the version that would exist after 60 more years of driving, 6 more decades of rest stops and highway miles and accumulated time. Another driver entered the bathroom, young guy, maybe 25, wearing a Schneider uniform. He went to the sink next to mine, started washing his hands. I watched his reflection in my peripheral vision. It showed him middle-aged, maybe 50, hair receding but not gone, face lined but not ancient. His actual face was smooth, unlined, young. His reflection was 25 years older. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing at the mirrors. "Do your reflections look normal?" He glanced at his reflection, showed no reaction to the age discrepancy. "Looks normal to me. Why?" "Your reflection is older than you are, so is mine. The mirrors are showing us aged." He looked more carefully, studying his reflection, then shrugged. "I just see myself. Regular." "You okay, man? You look stressed." He couldn't see it. The age difference was invisible to him, or he was lying, or I was hallucinating. But when I checked again, my reflection remained ancient while my actual hands stayed young. The discrepancy was real, visible, undeniable, at least to me. I left the bathroom quickly, needing distance from those wrong mirrors, needing to verify my actual appearance. In my truck's mirrors, I looked normal. Again. 32 years old, dark hair, unlined face. The rest area mirrors had shown something else, some future version, some temporal displacement. I should have left immediately. Should have started my engine and driven away from this place where reflections showed futures. But I needed to understand, needed to verify what I'd seen. I walked back to the facilities, this time entering the women's bathroom. Empty at this hour, signs saying closed for cleaning, ignored in my desperation to confirm the phenomenon wasn't isolated to one mirror. Every mirror showed the same thing: ancient me, 90-year-old me, end-of-life me. Hair completely gone now, scalp showing age spots and sun damage. Face so wrinkled it looked like crumpled paper. Eyes barely visible behind cataracts. Body bent and frail, looking like it could barely stand. This was me at the end, me after decades more of living, me as I would appear when time finished its work. And the reflection was moving on its own now, not matching my movements anymore. The ancient me in the mirror was turning, looking directly at me with those clouded eyes, mouth opening to speak. I heard his voice, my voice roughened by age and use, coming from the mirror. "Stop driving, stop now. Every mile takes you closer to this. Every rest stop ages you faster. Every mirror shows you further ahead. You're accelerating toward the end. 60 years compressed into 60 days. By next month, you'll look like me. By next week, you'll be dead. I backed away from the mirror, my actual heart pounding, my actual hands shaking. The ancient reflection watched me retreat, his expression sad, resigned, aware that his warning would be ignored because how do you stop driving when driving is your livelihood, your identity, your entire structure of existence? I left the bathroom, walked toward my truck. Past other drivers heading toward the facilities, watched them enter. Waited. Several emerged, looking shaken, disturbed, checking their actual faces against their actual hands. They'd seen it too. The age acceleration, the temporal displacement, the mirrors showing futures that shouldn't be visible yet. One driver, older woman, maybe 60, came out of the bathroom crying. "I look dead," she said to no one, to everyone, to the night itself. In the mirror, I was dead. Lying down, eyes closed, funeral home lighting, I was looking at my own corpse. The mirrors weren't just showing futures anymore, they were showing ends. Termination points. The moments when time stops and biology fails and existence concludes. Everyone who looked into those rest area mirrors was seeing their own death, or their approach to death, or some version of themselves that time would eventually create. I checked my truck's mirrors again. Still normal. 32, healthy, alive. But when I touched my face, I felt something wrong. Texture different than I remembered. Skin looser, lines appearing where smooth surface had been hours ago. I pulled down my sun visor, checked the vanity mirror. Saw myself at 40, 8 years older than I actually was. The rest area mirrors had infected my truck's mirrors. The temporal displacement was spreading. Other drivers were noticing too. A man stood by his Freightliner, staring at his side mirror in horror, watching himself age in real time. His reflection's hair whitened as he watched, face sagging, body deteriorating. "It's happening faster," he shouted. "I'm aging faster. Watch, I'm losing years every minute." He was right. His reflection was aging visibly, rapidly, years passing in seconds. 40 became 50, became 60, became 70. His actual face remained unchanged, but his reflection was racing toward the end, showing him what he would become compressed into minutes instead of decades. Several drivers ran for their trucks, engines starting simultaneously, vehicles pulling out of parking spaces in panicked rush to escape. But I saw what happened to them through the rest area's external security lights. Their trucks aged too, paint fading in seconds, chrome rusting, tires weathering. The vehicles were sharing the temporal acceleration, decaying rapidly, becoming derelict versions of themselves. One truck's engine seized completely, decades of wear occurring in moments. Another's tires blew out simultaneously, rubber perished by compressed time. The rest area was aging everything within it, not just reflections, reality itself. The building's paint was fading, concrete cracking, metal corroding. Trees around the perimeter were growing rapidly, branches extending, leaves appearing and falling in cycles that should take months but were occurring in minutes. Time was flowing wrong here, faster than normal, everything accelerating toward entropy. I made a decision born of pure terror. I climbed into my truck, started the engine. It coughed, struggling, sounding older than it had an hour ago, and drove directly away from the rest area without following roads. Across grass, through decorative barriers, bouncing over curbs. I needed distance from that place, needed to escape the temporal acceleration field before my truck aged into non-functionality. Behind me, the rest area was collapsing. Not explosively, but through rapid decay. Metal supports rusting through, concrete crumbling, glass shattering from frame warping. The entire facility was experiencing decades of deterioration in minutes, becoming ruins, becoming archaeological site, becoming dust. Other drivers' trucks were caught in the field, aging rapidly, drivers inside aging with them, decades passing in subjective seconds. I drove for 30 miles before I dared to check my mirrors again. Saw myself at 45, 13 years older than when I'd entered that rest area 3 hours ago. The temporal displacement had affected me permanently. I'd lost 13 years in a single night, aged through experiences I'd never had, jumped forward in timeline without traveling through the intervening period. My hands on the wheel showed the change now. Skin looser, veins more prominent, age spots appearing. My face in the rear view showed lines I'd never had, eyes showing fatigue that went beyond tiredness into something accumulated over years. I'd aged, really aged, physically aged. The rest area hadn't just shown me the future, it had moved me into it. Other drivers report similar experiences now. Rest areas where mirrors show wrong ages, facilities where time flows faster than outside, places where spending an hour costs you years. The Missouri rest area where I stopped is gone, collapsed completely, demolished officially due to structural failure, though I know the truth. Time destroyed it. Accelerated aging reduced it to ruins that were then cleared away. But the effect persists in other locations, other rest areas along I-70, along I-80, scattered across the highway system. Places where time flows wrong, where mirrors show futures, where spending minutes costs years. Drivers enter looking young and emerge aged, decades stolen, lifespans compressed, time accelerated beyond natural rates. I'm currently 53 years old according to my body. I was 32 less than a year ago. I've lost 21 years to rest areas with wrong mirrors, to facilities where time flows faster, to places that age everything within their boundaries at accelerated rates. My actual birth date hasn't changed. I'm legally still 32, but my body is 53. My cells have divided 21 years worth of times. My telomeres have shortened through decades of compression. I don't stop at rest areas anymore. Haven't entered one in months. I use bottles for relief, park on shoulders when I need sleep, avoid all facilities that might contain mirrors showing wrong times. But the aging continues anyway. Slower now, but persistent. I gain about a week of biological age for every actual week that passes. The rest area's temporal acceleration infected me permanently. I'm aging at 2x rate, burning through my lifespan twice as fast as normal people. Medical tests show biological age that doesn't match chronological age. Doctors are confused, concerned, unable to explain why my cells appear 21 years older than my birth date suggests they should be. I don't tell them about the rest area, about the mirrors, about the temporal acceleration field that stole decades and hours. I just accept that I'm dying faster than I should be, racing toward the end at double speed. Every year that passes costs me 2 years of lifespan. Every day burns through 2 days of biology. The rest area stole my timeline and left me aging out of synchronization with normal causality. The ancient reflection I saw in that first mirror, 90-something me, bent and failing, isn't 60 years away anymore. It's 30 years away. Maybe less if the acceleration rate increases. I'm sprinting toward that appearance, that condition, that termination point. The rest area where your reflection ages faster is still operating somewhere. Different locations, different facilities, same effect. Mirrors showing futures, time flowing wrong. Drivers entering young and emerging aged. It's spreading through the highway system, appearing at new locations, aging drivers faster than living should age them. I see them sometimes. Drivers who look far too old for their license photos, faces showing decades more wear than their birth dates allow. They've stopped at those rest areas too. Looked into those mirrors, had years stolen by temporal acceleration fields. They age visibly rapidly, burning through lifespans at rates that violate biology. And eventually, soon now maybe, I'll look exactly like that ancient reflection I saw, 90-something failing at the end. Except I'll only be 40 in terms of actual time passed. My body will have aged 50 years in 10. Temporal acceleration completing its work, bringing me to the termination point the mirrors showed. The reflection was a prophecy, and prophecies fulfilled through temporal manipulation become self-fulfilling regardless of choices made afterward. I saw my end in that mirror, the ancient face, the failing body, the approach of death. And every time I check a mirror now, any mirror anywhere, I'm older than the last time. The aging continues, the acceleration persists. The rest area infected me with temporally compressed existence. I'm racing toward the end at double speed, and there's no way to stop the acceleration, no way to restore normal time flow, no way to recover the decades that were stolen in a single night at a rest area where mirrors show futures and futures become inevitabilities. The ancient me is waiting. Just a few more years of compressed time. Just a few more trips to mirrors that show me getting older, closer, more similar to the prophecy. Soon I'll be him. The reflection will become reality, and time will finish what the rest area started, delivering me to the end decades ahead of schedule, aged by facilities that flow wrong, mirrors that show what will be and make what will be. Become what is through acceleration that violates everything time should be. Story 2. The cargo that screams your own voice. The shrieking from my sealed trailer started at mile marker 237 on I-40 through Oklahoma, and it was using my voice, not some approximation or imitation, but exactly my voice, perfect pitch and timbre and inflection, screaming words I'd never said but recognized as things I'd thought during my darkest moments, private fears and shameful memories and suicidal ideations I'd never spoken aloud, being broadcast from cargo I'd loaded 8 hours ago and hadn't opened since departure. My name is Janet Torres, and I'd been hauling refrigerated goods for 9 years without hearing my cargo make any sounds beyond normal road vibration and reefer unit operation. The freight manifest listed 47 pallets of frozen meat products, sealed at a processing plant in Amarillo, bound for a distribution center in Memphis. Standard load, temperature controlled, nothing unusual. But the screaming was definitely coming from my trailer. My own voice, multiplied and layered, dozens of me voices all shrieking simultaneously. I should have died in the crash. I'm worthless. I killed him and no one knows. I hate myself. I want to stop existing. These were thoughts I'd had, real thoughts from real moments, the crash 3 years ago where I'd been at fault, the pedestrian I'd hit and the guilt I'd never confessed, the depression that lived in my skull like a tumor, the persistent desire to just stop, to not be anymore. Private thoughts, internal thoughts, thoughts I'd never vocalized to anyone, not therapists or friends or family. Thoughts that existed only in my own mind, and my cargo was broadcasting them in my voice at volumes that must be audible to other highway traffic. I watched a passenger car pass me, saw the driver's face turn toward my trailer with expression of horror and confusion. She could hear it. She was hearing my voice screaming my darkest secrets at highway speed. I pulled onto the shoulder, hazards on, engine idling. The screaming continued, actually getting louder now that the road noise was eliminated. Multiple versions of my voice, all perfectly synchronized, delivering an audio stream of every terrible thought I'd ever had about myself. Self-loathing made external, depression made audible, suicidal ideation broadcast for public consumption. I'm a fraud, I'm broken, I'm disgusting. I should crash this truck into a bridge support. No one would miss me. I'm wasting oxygen. I climbed out, approached my trailer. The reefer unit was running normally, maintaining temperature, showing no mechanical issues. But through the sealed doors, the screaming was deafening. Not just my voice now, I could hear other voices too. other drivers maybe, all screaming their own secret thoughts, all broadcasting their private darkness through whatever cargo they were hauling. I tried my phone, intending to call dispatch to report this impossible situation. But my phone screen showed text messages I'd never sent, confessions I'd never written. I'm the one who hit that man on Route 66 3 years ago. I never reported it. I watched him die and I drove away. The messages were addressed to police, to victims' families, to news organizations, outgoing, sent, delivered. Except I'd never written them, never sent them, never confessed to anyone about what happened on Route 66. But somehow my cargo knew. Somehow the frozen meat products in my sealed trailer knew about the crash, about the hit and run, about the guilt I'd been carrying for 3 years. And they were broadcasting that. Knowledge in my voice, forcing confession, making private become public. Another truck pulled over behind me. Older driver, concerned expression. He approached my truck, shouting to be heard over the screaming, "Your trailer is making noise. Are you okay?" I don't know what's happening. The cargo is screaming, using my voice, saying things I've never said aloud. He listened for a moment, his expression changing from concern to recognition to horror. "That's your voice? Those are your thoughts?" He backed away quickly. "Jesus Christ, what are you hauling? What kind of freight does that?" "Frozen meat, standard refrigerated load. It shouldn't be making any sounds." But it was making sounds. Continuous screaming in my voice, occasionally interrupted by other voices. The voices of people I'd hurt, people I'd failed, people who had reasons to hate me. The pedestrian from Route 66, his voice mixed with mine now, both of us screaming accusations and confessions and demands for justice. The older driver was making calls, phone to his ear, talking rapidly. I heard fragments. Supernatural cargo stop broadcasting driver's thoughts. Need immediate response. He was reporting me. Reporting my cargo. Reporting the screaming. I climbed back into my cab, determined to drive away. To escape this situation before authorities arrived and started asking questions about why my cargo was confessing to hit-and-run manslaughter. But my truck wouldn't start. Engine cranked but wouldn't catch, like some critical component had failed or been disabled. I was stranded on the shoulder with cargo that was broadcasting every dark thought I'd ever had, every secret I'd kept, every crime I'd committed. The screaming intensified, adding new content. I stole from the company. I falsified logbooks. I drove drunk 17 times. I watched someone die and did nothing. Each accusation was true. Each confession was accurate. My cargo had access to my complete history, my entire consciousness, every memory and thought and decision I'd ever made. And it was making everything public, forcing me to hear my own voice cataloging my failures and crimes and moral compromises. Police arrived within 20 minutes, 2 highway patrol units, lights flashing. The screaming was clearly audible even through their closed windows. They approached my truck cautiously, hands near weapons, expressions suggesting they'd never encountered anything like this before. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle. We need to inspect your cargo. There are reports of unusual sounds coming from your trailer." I stepped out, hands visible, cooperating. What choice did I have? My cargo was confessing for me, eliminating any possibility of denying the accusations. They opened my trailer doors carefully, prepared for anything. Found exactly what the manifest promised. 47 pallets of frozen meat products, properly secured, temperature maintained, everything correct. Except the screaming was louder now with the doors open, my voice and the pedestrian's voice and other voices all mixing together, overlapping, creating a chorus of accusation and confession. One officer pressed his hands to his ears. "What the hell is that? Where's it coming from?" "I don't know. The cargo started screaming hours ago, using my voice. Saying things I've never said aloud. Saying things about a hit and run on Route 66 3 years ago. Saying you killed someone and drove away? Yes, that's what it's saying. But I didn't, except I had. I had killed someone and driven away. And lying now with my cargo screaming the truth felt impossible. The officer's expression hardened. Janet Torres, you're under arrest for vehicular manslaughter and leaving the scene of a fatal accident. You have the right to remain silent. He paused, listening to the continued screaming. Though apparently your cargo disagrees with that right. They cuffed me, read my rights while my own voice screamed confessions from the trailer. Loaded me into the patrol car while additional units arrived to secure the scene and investigate the impossible cargo that knew too much and said too much and made privacy impossible. I spent 3 days in county jail before the charges were processed. During those 3 days, I learned the truth. The frozen meat products I'd been hauling weren't meat. They were something else, organic material harvested from people who died with secrets, with guilt, with unconfessed crimes. The processing plant in Amarillo was collecting bodies, people who died carrying heavy secrets and processing their tissues into cargo that absorbed their memories and thoughts and would broadcast them during transport. The cargo was confession made mandatory, guilt made external, secrets made public. Everyone who hauled these loads experienced the same thing. Their cargo screaming their darkest thoughts, their private fears, their hidden crimes. The loads forced confession, forced accountability, forced drivers to face what they'd been hiding. Most drivers were arrested like me. Their cargo confessed for them, broadcast their crimes, eliminated any possibility of continued secrecy. The system was deliberate, a way of forcing truth, of making hidden things visible, of ensuring that guilt didn't remain private. I'm currently serving 8 years for vehicular manslaughter. The screaming cargo provided all the evidence prosecutors needed. Confession in my own voice, details only I could know, admission of guilt that I couldn't retract. The cargo had forced me to confess, and confession created legal accountability. Other drivers report similar experiences. Cargo that screams secrets, loads that broadcast thoughts, freight that forces confession. Most are arrested when their cargo reveals crimes. Some are institutionalized when their cargo reveals thoughts too dark for society to tolerate. All are changed by having their privacy violated so completely, by hearing their own voice say things they'd never said aloud, by having their internal world made external and public. The processing plant in Amarillo is still operating, still collecting bodies of people who died with secrets, still processing their tissues into cargo that absorbs consciousness, still shipping that cargo to drivers who don't know what they're hauling until the screaming starts and their own voices begin confessing things they've kept hidden. The cargo that screams your own voice is still being transported, still forcing confessions, still making private become public, still broadcasting darkness that should have remained internal. And somewhere a driver is loading that cargo right now, securing pallets, checking temperature, starting their route, completely unaware that within hours their own voice will start screaming from their sealed trailer, confessing everything they've ever hidden, every crime they've committed, every dark thought they've had. The screaming will force confession. The confession will force consequences. And the driver will learn what I learned, that some cargo knows too much, says too much, makes secrecy impossible. My voice is still screaming somewhere. That cargo was never fully unloaded. Some of it remains in storage, continuing to broadcast, continuing to confess. My thoughts made eternal, my darkness made permanent. My voice screaming my secrets forever, or until the organic material finally deteriorates and the consciousness it absorbed finally dissipates. Until then, somewhere in a warehouse, my voice is screaming, I killed him and no one knew. I killed him and I drove away. I deserve this. I deserve worse. The cargo knows. The cargo remembers, the cargo confesses, and no one who hauls it remains secret afterward. Story 3. The weigh station that weighs your sins. The scale at the Nevada weigh station showed 847 pounds when I rolled across it at 4:17 p.m. on August 9, 2024, which was impossible because my truck and empty trailer together should have weighed at least 34,000 pounds, and I hadn't been hauling any cargo since dropping my last load in Reno 6 hours earlier. The inspector approaching my window had an expression that suggested this reading wasn't a malfunction. It was exactly what the scale was designed to measure, and 847 pounds was a heavy burden indeed for someone driving an empty trailer. My name is Raymond Booker, and I learned that afternoon that some scales don't measure commercial weight. They measure moral weight, quantifying sin and guilt and ethical compromise in pounds that accumulate with every wrong decision, every harm caused, every line crossed. I'd been driving for 14 years, and apparently those 14 years had accumulated 847 pounds of moral debt that this Nevada facility was specifically designed to detect and measure. The inspector was a woman in her 50s, standard dot uniform, carrying a tablet instead of clipboard. She looked at her screen, looked at me, shook her head slowly. 847 pounds of sin weight. That's significant. That's actionable. I'm going to need you to pull into secondary inspection so we can itemize your moral violations. My what? The scale must be broken. I'm running empty. There's no cargo. The scale isn't measuring cargo. It's measuring you, your moral burden, your accumulated sin weight. Every wrong thing you've done adds pounds to your total. 847 pounds means you've done a lot of wrong things, Mr. Booker. Enough that we need to discuss consequences. She directed me to a separate bay where 2 other inspectors waited with specialized equipment. Not mechanical tools, but something else. Devices that looked like they belonged in a confession booth rather than a weigh station. They connected sensors to my hands, to my head, to my chest. Started asking questions while monitoring readings on their screens. Have you ever caused harm to another person deliberately? The first inspector asked. No, not really, not deliberately. The equipment beeped. The inspector checked his screen. That's 47 pounds of lie weight added to your total. Your current burden is now 894 pounds. Let me rephrase. Have you ever caused harm to another person? Yes, accidentally, in traffic situations. I've cut people off, forced them to brake, caused near accidents. How many times? I don't know. Hundreds probably. It happens in trucking. Each incident adds weight based on harm potential. You've accumulated approximately 340 pounds from dangerous driving alone. That's documented. He made notes on his tablet. What about theft? Have you stolen from employers, from cargo, from facilities? Small things. Food from break rooms. Fuel from company pumps when I ran personal errands. Nothing major. 67 pounds of theft weight. Property damage? I've hit things. Poles, barriers, other vehicles in parking lots. Sometimes I reported it, sometimes I didn't. 103 pounds of unreported damage. Fraud. I've falsified logbooks, driven over hours, faked inspection reports when I was too tired to do them properly. 189 pounds of regulatory fraud. Infidelity? I hesitated. That question seemed out of scope for a weigh station. But the equipment was monitoring my responses, detecting lies, adding weight for dishonesty. Yes, I've cheated on my wife, multiple times. With lot lizards, with other drivers, with anyone who was available when I was lonely. 78 pounds of betrayal weight. Neglect? I missed my daughter's childhood. I was always on the road. I wasn't there for birthdays, for school events, for any of it. I chose trucking over family. 43 pounds of negligent parenting. Total documented sin weight, 820 pounds. Plus your initial 847 reading suggests an additional 27 pounds of undisclosed moral violations. What are you not telling us? I didn't want to answer. Didn't want to confess the worst thing, the thing I'd never told anyone. But the equipment was waiting, monitoring, ready to detect any lie. I killed someone, not on purpose. I was driving exhausted, fighting to stay awake. I drifted into the shoulder, hit a broken-down car, killed the driver who was changing his tire. I didn't stop. I drove away. No one ever connected me to the accident. 27 pounds exactly, that completes your burden assessment. The inspector showed me a detailed breakdown on his tablet. Every sin itemized, every moral violation quantified, my entire history of wrong decisions converted into measurable weight. 847 pounds total. That exceeds our threshold for mandatory rehabilitation. You're being detained until your burden is reduced to acceptable levels. Detained? You can't detain me for moral violations. That's not how law works. This isn't law. This is something older. This weigh station measures what matters. Not commercial weight, but moral weight. Every driver who crosses our scales gets assessed. Most are under 100 pounds, normal human failings, minor compromises, acceptable sin loads. But 847 pounds? That's a lifetime of wrong choices. That's someone who's been causing harm consistently for years. We can't let you continue driving with that burden. You're a danger to yourself and others. They took my keys, escorted me to a facility behind the weigh station. Not a jail, but something like a monastery or a rehabilitation center. Sparse rooms, meditation spaces, confession booths. Other drivers were there, all of them detained for excessive sin weight, all of them working to reduce their moral burdens through processes that involved facing what they'd done, making amends where possible, accepting consequences where amends were impossible. I spent 6 months in that facility. 6 months of forced reflection, mandated confession, supervised rehabilitation. They made me contact my wife, confess the infidelity, accept her decision to divorce me. Made me contact my daughter, apologize for absence, accept her anger and hurt. Made me contact victims' families where possible, offer restitution, face the impact of my carelessness and selfishness. The process was designed to reduce sin weight. Each genuine act of accountability, each real amends made, each consequence accepted would reduce the total burden. They weighed me weekly on specialized scales, tracking my moral progress. 847 became 790, became 721, became 6555. But some weight wouldn't reduce. The manslaughter weight from the hit and run stayed constant at 27 pounds no matter how much I confessed or how deeply I reflected. That sin required legal accountability, not just moral rehabilitation. So I confessed to authorities, provided details about the accident, accepted arrest and prosecution for vehicular manslaughter and leaving the scene. The legal process took another year. I pleaded guilty, received 5 years sentence with possibility of parole after 3. When they weighed me again after sentencing, the manslaughter weight had reduced to 3 pounds, still present because I couldn't undo the death, couldn't restore the life I'd taken, but significantly reduced by acceptance of legal consequences. I'm currently 2 years into my sentence. I've been weighed 4 times during incarceration. My current total burden is 84 pounds, mostly residual weight from harms I can't fully repair, relationships I damaged beyond fixing, trust I destroyed that can't be restored. But compared to the 847 pounds I carried when I first crossed that scale, 84 feels manageable. The weigh station in Nevada is still operating, still measuring sin weight instead of cargo weight. Other drivers cross those scales daily, most passing through with acceptable burdens under 100 pounds. But some get detained like I was, their moral violations too heavy to ignore, their accumulated sins quantified and made undeniable. The system is spreading. More weigh stations are installing the moral measurement equipment. More facilities are being built to detain and rehabilitate drivers with excessive sin weight. The dot denies involvement. This is something else, something older, something that exists in regulatory spaces beyond normal governmental authority. But it works. Drivers who pass through these stations emerge changed, their burdens reduced, their moral weight made visible and then decreased through accountability and amends. The scales force confrontation with what we've done, who we've hurt, what we've become through years of compromises and wrong choices. I'll be released eventually. We'll return to driving eventually. But I'll be different, lighter, both literally and metaphorically. My burden reduced to levels that the scales consider acceptable. I'll carry 84 pounds of irreducible moral weight for the rest of my life, permanent record of harms I caused that can't be fully repaired. But compared to what I was carrying, compared to the 847 pounds that nearly crushed me, 84 feels like liberation. The weigh station that weighs your sins is waiting. Maybe you've crossed it already. Maybe you've been weighed and found wanting, or weighed and found acceptable, or weighed and detained for rehabilitation. Maybe your burden is manageable, or maybe it's crushing you and you don't even know it yet because you've never been quantified, never been measured, never seen your moral weight converted to pounds. Drive carefully. Make better choices. Reduce your burden before the scales force you to confront it. Because eventually you'll cross those scales, eventually your sins will be weighed, and eventually you'll learn whether your moral burden is acceptable or whether you're carrying too much weight to continue driving without intervention. I learned the hard way. 847 pounds, 847 pounds of accumulated sin, quantified, measured, made undeniable, and then slowly, painfully reduced through accountability that I'd avoided for years. The scales are waiting, your burden is accumulating, and eventually you'll be weighed. Story 4. The hitchhiker who gets younger every mile. The old man I picked up outside Flagstaff was 90 if he was a day. White hair, deeply lined face, hands spotted and trembling, body bent with decades of gravity. He climbed into my passenger seat with difficulty at 11:43 p.m. on September 14, 2024. Thanked me in a voice rough with age, and asked if I could take him as far as Albuquerque. By the time we reached the New Mexico border 3 hours later, he looked 60, his hair darker, his face smoother, his hands steady, his posture straightening with each mile traveled, aging backward at a rate that should have been impossible but was undeniably happening in my passenger seat. My name is Patricia Sullivan, and I drove with that man for 8 hours, watching him regress through decades, seeing him transform from ancient to elderly to middle-aged to young, time flowing backward for him while flowing forward for me, each mile subtracting years from his body while adding miles to my odometer, creating an impossible equation where distance traveled equaled time removed until he wasn't an old man anymore but something else, something younger. Something approaching the beginning rather than the end. At first I thought the changes were tricks of light, my tired eyes seeing things wrong, shadows and dashboard illumination creating illusions of youth. But when we stopped for fuel at the Arizona-New Mexico border, I saw him clearly under gas station lights. 60 years old now, maybe 55. Definitely not 90. The transformation was real. He was aging backward, shedding decades, approaching some earlier version of himself through mechanisms I didn't understand. "You're getting younger," I said as we resumed driving. "I'm not imagining that, am I?" He smiled, his teeth now white and complete, his face now only moderately lined. "No, you're not imagining it. I get younger when I travel east. That's why I need rides. I'm trying to reach the beginning again. Trying to get back to when I was young, when I could start over, when I could make different choices." "That's impossible. People don't age backward. Most people don't. But I'm not most people anymore. I made a deal, sold something important. Got this in exchange. The ability to reverse time for myself by traveling east. Every mile east removes time from my body. Every hour of driving subtracts years from my age. I've been traveling for weeks now, hitching rides from drivers willing to take me, aging backward from 103 to where I am now. By Albuquerque, he looked 45. Strong jaw, dark hair with only traces of gray, skin tight and healthy. The 90-year-old who'd entered my truck had been replaced by someone middle-aged. Someone who looked like they'd lived half a life instead of a full one, and the regression wasn't stopping. He was still getting younger, still shedding years, still approaching something that shouldn't be reachable through any normal process. "What happens when you reach zero?" I asked. "When you get younger than birth?" "That's what I'm trying to find out. I think I'll stop at conception. I think I'll reach the moment where I began, and that will be the limit, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'll keep regressing. Maybe I'll become potential rather than actual. Maybe I'll cease to exist as a person and become just possibility, just chance, just the idea of a person who could exist but hasn't yet." We drove through the night, stopping only for fuel and food. Each stop showed him younger. By Oklahoma City, he looked 30. By St. Louis, he looked 20. His voice had changed too, losing the roughness of age, becoming smoother, higher pitched, more like a teenager than an adult. His body was smaller, less developed, losing muscle mass and height, regressing toward adolescence. "I'm scared," he admitted somewhere in Missouri, his voice now clearly that of a young man, maybe 18. I thought I wanted this. Thought I wanted to go back, to have another chance. But I'm losing everything I was. Every memory is fading as I age backward. I can't remember my children's names anymore. Can't remember my wife's face. I'm losing my life as I lose the years. Then stop. Get out. Stop traveling east. I can't. The deal was permanent. Once I started the regression, it doesn't stop until I reach the beginning. I have to keep traveling east until I'm young enough, until I'm back at the start. And then, I don't know, maybe I'll get a new life. Maybe I'll just cease existing. Maybe I'll be trapped as a baby forever, unable to grow forward again. By Indianapolis, he looked 12. Small, prepubescent, his voice cracking, his clothes too large for his shrinking body. The regression was accelerating now, years dropping away faster, childhood approaching rapidly. He was crying quietly, child tears running down a child face, mourning for an adulthood he was losing, a life that was being erased mile by mile. "Please," he said in a voice that was now definitely a child's voice. "Please turn around, drive west, maybe it will reverse the process. Maybe I'll start aging forward again." I turned around, drove west for an hour. He stopped getting younger but didn't start aging forward. The regression had paused but not reversed. Time's direction had been arrested but not restored. He remained a 12-year-old boy frozen at that age, unable to regress further or progress again. "It doesn't work," he said, despair clear in his child voice. "I can't go back to being an adult. I can only stop regressing or continue regressing. The deal didn't include reversal. It only included backward motion." I turned east again, resuming the original direction. He immediately started getting younger again, 11, 10, 9. The regression continued, childhood years dropping away, approaching something that should have been a limit but apparently wasn't. By Cleveland, he looked 6. By Buffalo, he looked 3. Small enough that the seatbelt didn't fit properly, child-sized, toddler-proportioned, barely able to speak in complete sentences. "I'm sorry," he said in a tiny voice. "I'm sorry for involving you. I'm sorry you have to watch this. I'm sorry I made the deal." Near the New York border, he became an infant. Unable to speak, only cry. I had to stop, had to hold him, this impossible baby who had been an old man hours ago. His infant eyes looked at me with awareness that babies shouldn't have, consciousness that understood what was happening even as his body lost the capacity to express that understanding. I drove the final miles to the Atlantic coast with an infant in my passenger seat. This regressed person who was approaching conception, approaching the beginning, approaching the moment where he would either stop existing or transform into something else entirely. At the beach, I carried him to the water's edge. Dawn was breaking, sun rising over the ocean, light touching the eastern horizon. The infant looked at the sunrise, then started becoming transparent. Not fading, more like he was being unmade, his physical form dissolving, his body becoming less substantial. He was regressing past birth, past conception, past the beginning of physical existence, becoming potential rather than actual. Becoming the possibility of a person rather than a person. Within minutes, he was gone completely. The infant had vanished, leaving no trace except infant clothes on the sand and memories in my mind of a man who'd aged backward from ancient to absent, who'd traveled east to reach the beginning and had discovered that the beginning was not a stopping point but a transitional phase into something less than existence. I kept the clothes, drove back west alone, my passenger seat empty but haunted by the memory of regression, by the image of a person becoming younger until they stopped being a person at all, becoming just possibility, just the idea of someone who might exist someday but didn't exist anymore because they'd reached the beginning and passed through it into non-being. Other drivers report similar experiences. Hitchhikers who get younger during travel. Old people who regress toward youth, losing years with every mile, approaching beginnings they never reach or reaching beginnings that don't stop them but transform them into something less than physical. The highways are full of people trying to return to the start, to undo what time has done, to reverse aging through travel and deals and mechanisms that seem to work but have prices that aren't clear until the regression completes. The hitchhiker who gets younger every mile is still traveling somewhere, on some highway, with some driver who's watching them shed decades, approach childhood, become infants, and then vanish into potential as they regress past the beginning into non-existence. It's still happening. Still offering apparent hope of youth restored, second chances gained, time reversed. But the cost is everything. The cost is existence itself. Because regressing to the beginning means reaching a point where you haven't been born yet, where you're just possibility rather than actuality, where you stop being real and become merely potential again. I drive alone now. Never pick up hitchhikers. Never risk witnessing that regression again, that slow erasure, that transition from person to infant to potential to nothing. The memories are enough. The image of that infant becoming transparent at the beach, regressing past birth, vanishing into non-existence as dawn broke over the Atlantic. He wanted to reach the beginning. He reached it. And the beginning wasn't a destination. It was an ending. A different kind of ending than death, but an ending nonetheless. The end of existence through regression past the starting point into the space before beginning where potential exists but persons don't. The hitchhiker aged backward. The miles removed years. And at the end of the journey there was nothing. Just empty clothes on sand and the terrible knowledge that some destinations aren't reachable. Some beginnings can't be returned to, some regressions don't stop at birth but continue past it into states where existence hasn't begun and won't begin because the person has unmade themselves through backward motion. I still see infant clothes in my passenger seat sometimes. Phantom memories. Echoes of regression witnessed. Reminders that time flows one direction for most of us, and those who try to reverse it through deals and travel and Eastern motion discover that backward leads eventually to nowhere, to non-being, to the space before existence where potential lives but persons don't. The hitchhiker who gets younger every mile is gone, regressed to nothing, unmade through backward motion. And the highway continues, carrying other drivers, other hitchhikers, other people trying to reach beginnings that will transform them from actual to potential, from being to non-being, from persons to possibilities that never materialize because they've traveled too far east, regressed too far backward, passed through the beginning into the space beyond where existence stops and only potential remains. Story 5. The truck stop with no exit. I took exit 247 off I-80 in Nebraska because my fuel light had been glowing for 30 miles and the next services weren't for another 40. Pulling into a truck stop that looked normal from the highway. Standard Flying J layout, bright lights, rows of pumps. But once I'd turned off the exit ramp at 3:27 a.m. on October 8, 2024, I couldn't find the entrance ramp back to the interstate. Just more parking lots looping into themselves, road signs pointing to exits that led to more parking lots, a labyrinth of pavement and painted lines that had no escape route no matter how many times I circled looking for the way out. My name is Marcus Chen, and I spent 9 days trapped in that truck stop, driving in circles through parking lots that should have been finite but weren't, following signs that promised I-80 East or I-80 West, but only led back to more parking lots, passing the same buildings over and over while my odometer accumulated miles that went nowhere, that just created circles within circles within circles, distance traveled without destination reached, motion without progress, driving without arriving. Other trucks were there, dozens of them, all circling like me, all searching for the exit that had to exist because we'd all entered somehow but couldn't find the way out. I'd pass the same Schneider truck every 15 minutes, same Walmart truck, same independent haulers in aging freightliners, all of us trapped in the same impossible loop, all driving continuously because stopping felt dangerous, felt like giving up, felt like accepting that we'd never escape. The fuel pumps worked. That was the cruelest part. Every time my tank approached empty, I'd see pumps ahead, would pull in and fuel successfully. Credit card accepted, diesel flowing normally. Tank refilling to allow more circling, more searching, more driving through parking lots that looped endlessly. The truck stop was keeping us functional, keeping us mobile, ensuring we could continue driving even though driving accomplished nothing. The convenience store was always open, always staffed, always stocked. I'd go inside for food and coffee and the clerk, same woman every time, same tired smile, would process my transaction normally as if there was nothing unusual about a truck stop you could enter but not exit. "Find everything okay?" she'd ask, scanning my items, accepting payment, handing me a receipt. "How do I get back to the interstate?" I asked on my third visit, 6 hours into the loop. She looked at me blankly. "The interstate? You're at the interstate. This is a truck stop. You entered from the interstate, you'll leave to the interstate." "But I can't find the entrance ramp. I've been circling for hours. Every exit just leads to more parking lots." "That doesn't sound right. The entrance ramps are clearly marked. Maybe you're just missing them. Keep looking. You'll find the way out." But I didn't find it. Kept circling, kept searching, kept following signs that promised highway access but delivered only more loops. Past other drivers who'd clearly been there longer than me. One trucker told me he'd been circling for 3 months, had gone through dozens of fuel tanks, had spent thousands on diesel to go nowhere, had tried everything to escape, including crashing through barriers that just regenerated, driving off into the fields surrounding the truck stop that turned out to be painted asphalt disguised as grass. "There's no exit," he said through his window during one of our frequent passes. "This place doesn't let you leave. You enter from the interstate, but the connection severs behind you. You're trapped in a loop that has no terminus, no escape, no conclusion. Just continuous circling until you run out of will or money or sanity." That's impossible. Truck stops don't work that way. There are maps, GPS, satellite imagery. Someone would notice if a truck stop was trapping drivers. "Check your GPS." I checked. It showed me on I-80 in Nebraska, moving normally, making progress. But I wasn't on I-80. I was in a parking lot, circling, going nowhere. The GPS was lying, or I was existing in 2 states simultaneously. One where I was traveling normally, and one where I was trapped in an infinite loop. I tried calling for help. 911 calls went through, operators answered, but they couldn't understand my problem. "You're at a truck stop? Just leave the truck stop." Simple instructions that didn't account for the impossibility I was experiencing. I tried calling my company dispatch. Same confusion, same inability to comprehend that I was trapped in a place with no exit. Days blurred together. I'd circle, fuel, eat, sleep briefly in my cab, then resume circling. The truck stop's layout never changed, but my perception of it kept shifting. Sometimes the parking lot seemed small, maybe 10 acres. Sometimes it seemed vast, stretching to horizons that shouldn't exist. Sometimes I'd drive for hours without passing other trucks, the loop extending, space expanding. Sometimes I'd encounter the same trucks every few minutes, the loop contracting, space compressing. Other drivers reported similar distortions. One woman said she'd driven 2,000 miles through the truck stop's parking lots, her odometer accumulating distance that went nowhere. Another driver said he'd been there so long his truck's warranty had expired, regular maintenance had become overdue, mechanical issues were developing that he couldn't address because there were no repair facilities in the loop, just fuel and food and endless pavement. I tried abandoning my truck, walked away from it, tried to find an exit on foot. But the walking just created more loops, more circles, pathways that curved back to starting points no matter which direction I chose. The truck stop extended infinitely in all directions, or I was moving through space that redirected, that refused to allow, departure that kept everything circling within its boundaries. Food started tasting wrong around day 5, not spoiled but artificial, like I was eating the idea of food rather than actual food, consuming substances that satisfied immediate hunger but provided no real nutrition. I was losing weight despite eating regularly, my body consuming itself because the truck stop's food was just enough to keep me conscious but not enough to sustain me long term. On day 7, I encountered a driver who'd been there for 2 years. His truck was ancient, showing wear that shouldn't have been possible in just 2 years. Paint completely faded, chrome rusted through, tires bald and cracking. He looked skeletal, his body consumed by prolonged entrapment, his eyes hollow, his movements slow and mechanical. "Stop circling," he advised, his voice barely above a whisper. "Circling is what keeps us here. We're powering the loop with our motion. Every mile we drive feeds the system, keeps it running, keeps us trapped. If we all stop simultaneously, the loop might fail, might collapse, might release us. Then why don't we stop? Because stopping feels like death. Because our instinct is to keep moving, keep searching, keep trying to escape. Because the truck stop knows that drivers drive and it uses that knowledge to trap us. As long as we're circling, we're sustaining our own imprisonment." I tried stopping, parked my truck, shut down the engine, sat in my cab for hours. Nothing changed. The loop continued around me, other trucks still circling, still searching. My stopping had no effect because I was just one driver among dozens, and the loop needed collective cessation to fail. But coordinating dozens of trapped drivers was impossible. Some had been there so long they'd forgotten why they were circling, just drove mechanically, instinct keeping them mobile. Some couldn't accept that stopping might help, convinced that the next circle would reveal the exit. Some were too afraid to stop, believing that motion was safety and stillness was surrender. On day 9, I found something. Not an exit, something else. A gap in the painted lines, a space where the parking lot pattern broke, where the asphalt looked different, darker, less maintained. I drove toward it cautiously, passed through it, felt reality shift and redistribute, felt the truck stop's grip weaken, felt normal causality reassert itself. And suddenly I was on an entrance ramp, merging back onto I-80 westbound, traffic flowing normally around me. The truck stop behind me looked standard, ordinary, showing no evidence of the impossible loop I'd escaped. My odometer showed I'd traveled 473 miles during those 9 days. My GPS showed I'd been making normal progress across Nebraska. Reality had rewritten itself to account for my absence. But I'd lost 9 days. 9 days of my life spent circling, searching, trapped in a loop that shouldn't exist. My delivery was 9 days late. My company was furious, threatened termination for abandoned cargo and missed schedules. I had no explanation they'd accept, no way to prove I'd been trapped, no evidence beyond my own memories and the wear on my truck that shouldn't have accumulated so quickly. Other drivers emerged sometimes from that truck stop, days or weeks or months after entering, all reporting the same experience. Impossible loops, no exit, continuous circling through parking lots that extend infinitely or compress to nothing depending on perception. Most stop driving afterward, traumatized by entrapment, unable to take exits anymore without terror that they'll enter another loop. The truck stop is still operating, still accessible from I-80 in Nebraska, still looks normal from the highway. GPS doesn't warn about it. Maps don't mark it as dangerous. It just exists, waiting for the next driver who's desperate for fuel, who takes exit 247, who enters the loop and spends days or weeks or months or years circling, searching for an escape that might not exist. I drive past that exit now, even when my fuel light is glowing, even when I'm desperate. I'd rather run out of gas on the highway than risk entering that truck stop again. Risk circling through parking lots that have no terminus, risk joining the drivers who've been there for years, still searching, still circling, still believing they'll find the exit if they just drive a little further, search a little longer, circle one more time. The truck stop with no exit is waiting. Exit 247 I-80 in Nebraska, normal appearance, impossible interior, entrance easy, exit maybe impossible. Days lost, distance accumulated without progress, circles within circles within circles, motion without arrival, driving without destination, fuel that keeps you mobile to continue searching for escape that might not exist. I escaped, barely, after 9 days, with permanent trauma and fear of exits that might trap, of loops that might not end, of truck stops that look normal but contain impossible geometry, and infinite parking lots and other drivers circling forever, still searching, still hoping, still trapped. Story 6. The load that gets heavier when you think about it. The cargo started at 43,000 pounds when I loaded it in Seattle. Standard weight for 46 pallets of industrial equipment, properly distributed and secured according to the manifest. But when I crossed the Idaho way station 70 miles later, the scale showed 68,000 pounds, 25,000 pounds heavier than loading, impossible weight gain during sealed transport on continuous highway. My truck struggling under burden that hadn't existed an hour ago and shouldn't exist now. My name is Angela Frost, and I spent 6 days hauling cargo that increased in weight the more I thought about it, watching my load grow heavier with each mental consideration, each conscious acknowledgement, each moment of awareness about what I was carrying, my thoughts themselves adding mass to freight that responded to consciousness, that fed on attention, that gained pounds through observation and mental focus until my truck was carrying burdens far beyond its rated capacity, and still, the weight kept increasing every time my mind turned to the cargo behind me. The weigh station inspector was baffled. Your loading receipt shows 43,000 pounds. Scale shows 68,000. That's impossible accumulation in 70 miles. What are you really carrying? Industrial equipment, manufacturing machinery, nothing unusual. The manifest lists everything. Then either your loading scale was wrong or something's been added during transport. Pull into secondary inspection. We need to examine the cargo. They opened my trailer, seals intact, no evidence of tampering, and found exactly what the manifest promised. 46 pallets of industrial equipment properly secured, nothing additional, nothing removed. But when they tried moving the pallets with forklifts, the equipment was impossibly heavy. Each unit weighing far more than specifications indicated, metal components somehow denser than they should be, mass concentrated beyond normal material properties. This equipment weighs 3 times what the manufacturer's specs say it should, the inspector said, checking documentation. A 200-pound assembly is weighing 600 pounds. A 500-pound machine is weighing 1,500. Everything's wrong. Everything's heavier than possible. I loaded it in Seattle. It weighed normal then. Something happened during transport. Cargo doesn't spontaneously gain mass. That violates physics. Either the loading scale was miscalibrated or... He trailed off, clearly unable to complete that thought with anything rational. They cleared me eventually, unable to explain the discrepancy, but unable to prove any violation either. I continued toward my destination in Denver, my truck straining under the impossible load, suspension compressed, brakes working harder, every mile requiring more fuel and effort than the distance should demand. And I noticed something strange. When I deliberately thought about the cargo, imagined it in my trailer, visualized the pallets, consciously considered what I was hauling, my truck became harder to control, heavier, more resistant to acceleration. But when I distracted myself with music or podcasts or anything that kept my attention away from the load, the handling improved slightly, the weight seemed less oppressive, the truck responded more normally. The cargo was responding to my thoughts. When I was aware of it, when I was consciously thinking about what I was carrying, it gained mass. When I was distracted, when my attention was elsewhere, it maintained baseline weight. My observation was adding pounds. My consciousness was increasing burden. I tested this theory carefully, spent an hour deliberately not thinking about the cargo, keeping my mind focused on anything else, counting mile markers, reciting song lyrics, solving math problems. My truck's handling improved noticeably. Acceleration was easier, braking required less distance, the load felt more manageable. Then I spent 10 minutes thinking intensely about the cargo, visualizing each pallet, imagining the equipment, consciously focusing on what was in my trailer. My truck became sluggish immediately, struggling like the weight had doubled, suspension compressing further, brakes straining. The cargo's weight was proportional to my attention. The more I thought about it, the heavier it became. The less I thought about it, the lighter it remained. My consciousness was literally adding mass through observation, through mental focus, through the act of being aware of what I was carrying. This should have been my opportunity to keep my mind distracted, to avoid thinking about the cargo, to maintain light weight through deliberate inattention. But try not thinking about something. Try keeping your mind away from a topic you've been told not to consider. Try maintaining complete mental distance from cargo you're hauling cross-country. Cargo that you know responds to thought. Cargo that gets heavier every time your attention turns to it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The more I tried to distract myself, the more my mind wandered back to the cargo, checking it mentally, visualizing it, becoming aware of its presence. And each time my thoughts returned to the load, it gained weight, became heavier, increased in burden until my truck was dangerously overloaded, suspension failing, brakes inadequate, handling impossible. By Montana, my scale weight was over 90,000 pounds. 50,000 pounds heavier than loading, cargo that should have weighed 43,000 now weighing over 90,000 because I couldn't stop thinking about it, couldn't maintain the mental discipline required to keep the weight low, couldn't avoid the natural human tendency to think about the very thing you're trying not to think about. I tried meditation, tried mindfulness exercises, tried every mental technique I could find for maintaining blank mind, for avoiding specific thoughts, for keeping consciousness directed away from certain topics. Nothing worked consistently. My attention kept returning to the cargo, and each return added more weight, more burden, more impossible mass. Other drivers noticed. My truck was clearly struggling, moving slowly, laboring up grades, braking distances dangerously long. CB radio crackled with concerns. "Westbound overloaded truck, you okay? You're barely moving. That rig's gonna blow an axle or burn up the brakes. Someone report that overweight, that's dangerous." I couldn't explain. Couldn't say that my cargo gained weight from being thought about, that every conscious consideration added pounds, that I was carrying burden created by observation itself. They'd think I was insane, exhausted, hallucinating. And maybe I was. Maybe the weight gain was psychosomatic, my perception affected by stress rather than actual mass increasing. Maybe the cargo weighed normal and I was just experiencing the psychological effects of believing it was getting heavier. But the scale readings were real. The mechanical strain was real. The brake wear was real. Something was happening to my cargo. Something that correlated perfectly with my thoughts. Something that violated physics but was undeniably occurring. In Wyoming, I tried an extreme approach. Took prescription sleeping medication. Knocked myself unconscious for 8 hours. Eliminated all thought, including thought about cargo. When I woke, my truck was parked on the shoulder. I'd apparently pulled over as the medication took effect, and my handling had normalized significantly. Whatever weight the cargo had gained while I was conscious had reduced during unconsciousness, my lack of thought allowing the mass to decrease. But I couldn't drive while unconscious. Couldn't maintain that state for the remaining miles to Denver. Eventually, I had to resume driving. Resume being conscious, resume having thoughts that inevitably included consideration of cargo. And the weight gain resumed immediately. Pounds accumulating with each mental acknowledgement of what I was carrying. I delivered the cargo 3 days late, arriving in Denver with a load that weighed over 120,000 pounds according to the receiving dock's scale. 80,000 pounds heavier than loading. Triple the original weight. Mass that had accumulated purely through my inability to stop thinking about it, through the cargo's response to observation, through some property of the equipment that converted attention into weight. The receiving supervisor was astonished. "This equipment weighs 3 times specification weight. How did you even move this load? How did your truck's axles survive?" "I don't know. The weight kept increasing during transport, started at 43,000, ended at over 120,000. Something about the cargo responds to thought, gains mass when observed mentally." He nodded like this made sense. "Quantum reactive materials. The equipment contains components that exist in superposition states until observed. Observation collapses the probability wave, forcing the materials into definite states that have higher mass than unobserved states. The more you think about it, the more you force observation, the more the quantum states collapse into heavier configurations. You should have been told not to think about the cargo during transport." "No one told me that." "That's a serious oversight. These loads require drivers who can maintain mental discipline, who can keep their thoughts away from the cargo, who can transport quantum reactive materials without observing them mentally. Your observation added 80,000 pounds of mass through quantum collapse. That's actually impressive. Most drivers add maybe 20,000 before they learn to control their thoughts." They offloaded the cargo carefully using specialized equipment designed for quantum reactive materials. As each pallet was removed and isolated in observation-shielded containers, the equipment's weight decreased back toward specification levels, the quantum states returning to superposition when mental observation was prevented. I left Denver lighter physically but heavier psychologically. I'd spent 6 days being mentally tortured by cargo that punished thought, that gained weight through observation, that forced me to confront the impossibility of not thinking about something you're deliberately trying not to think about. The psychological effect was exhausting, maddening, a form of mental torture disguised as transportation work. Other drivers report similar experiences now. Cargo that responds to thought, loads that gain weight when observed mentally. Quantum reactive materials that exist in light states until consciousness collapses their wave functions into heavy states. The shipping industry is adopting these materials because they're efficient when transported properly. Baseline weight low, transport cost minimal, but devastating when drivers can't maintain mental discipline. I refuse those loads now. Won't haul quantum reactive materials, won't transport cargo that responds to thought, won't subject myself to the psychological torture of trying not to think about something while being hyper-aware of exactly what I'm trying not to think about. The mental discipline required is beyond my capability, beyond most drivers' capability, beyond what should be expected of people who are just trying to move goods from origin to destination. The load that gets heavier when you think about it is still being shipped, still transported by drivers who don't know what they're carrying, who don't understand the cargo response to observation, who spend days watching weight accumulate through the simple act of being conscious and aware and thinking about what's in their trailer. The loads are efficient for companies, profitable for shippers, but devastating for drivers who experience the impossible burden of cargo that gains mass from thought, that converts consciousness into weight, that makes the simple act of awareness into a form of torture. Don't think about the cargo, don't observe it mentally. Don't allow your thoughts to turn toward what you're carrying. And if you fail, when you fail, because everyone fails eventually, watch the weight increase, watch your truck struggle, watch physics violate itself through quantum collapse forced by the simple act of human consciousness directed toward freight that shouldn't respond to thought but does, that shouldn't gain mass from observation but will, that shouldn't punish awareness but always will because that's how quantum reactive materials work and that's the price of transporting them. Mental discipline or increasing burden, mental control or impossible weight. Success in not thinking or failure through the natural human tendency to think about exactly what you're trying not to think about. The cargo gained 80,000 pounds from my thoughts. 80,000 pounds added through observation, through consciousness, through the simple act of being aware of what I was carrying. And every driver who hauls these loads experiences the same thing. Weight increasing with thought, burden growing with awareness, impossibility made real through quantum collapse forced by human consciousness that can't stop thinking about what it's been told not to think about. Story 7. The CB radio that only receives tomorrow's traffic. The voice on Channel 19 was giving detailed traffic reports for I-95 northbound through Virginia, describing accidents and construction delays and specific exit closures that I was currently passing through without incident at 11:47 p.m. on November 3, 2024. The speaker was using my handle, Night Rider, and speaking in my exact voice about conditions that weren't present, events that hadn't occurred, situations that didn't exist yet. Delivering tomorrow's traffic information through today's CB frequency, warning about problems I'd encounter in approximately 24 hours when I made this same drive again tomorrow. My name is Richard Hayes, and I spent 3 days listening to my own voice broadcast traffic reports from the future, hearing myself describe accidents before they happened, construction before it was deployed, delays before they occurred, every warning accurate but delivered 1 day early, creating an impossible situation where I knew tomorrow's problems today but couldn't effectively use that knowledge because the warnings came through my CB radio in my voice describing my future drive as if I was experiencing it in present tense when really I was experiencing today's drive, which tomorrow me was reporting on today. Night Rider, this is Night Rider, my voice said through the speaker, crisp and clear despite coming from 24 hours in the future. Heavy backup at mile marker 147, 4-car accident blocking right 2 lanes, expect 40-minute delay. Recommend taking exit 143 and using route 301 alternate. I was at mile marker 139, 8 miles from the reported accident location. No traffic backup visible ahead, no signs of incident. Just normal late-night traffic flowing smoothly. But I'd learned already that these future reports were accurate. Yesterday's broadcast had warned about construction at mile marker 162, and when I'd reached that location today, the construction had indeed been present exactly as described, causing the delays my future self had reported 24 hours earlier. I took exit 143 as recommended, followed Route 301 north, bypassed whatever accident would occur at mile marker 147 tomorrow when tomorrow me made this same drive and encountered the 4-car pileup that today me had avoided through advance warning. But the paradox bothered me. If I avoided the accident, would it still happen tomorrow? Would tomorrow me encounter something I'd avoided, or would my evasion today mean tomorrow's conditions were different, making the warning incorrect? I returned to I-95 at the next opportunity, continuing north. My CB radio continued broadcasting future reports in my voice. Night Rider here, weather deteriorating rapidly past mile marker 178. Heavy rain causing hydroplaning conditions, multiple vehicles off-road. Reduce speed significantly or consider stopping until conditions improve. Mile marker 178 was 40 miles ahead. Current conditions were clear, dry, no precipitation. But I reduced speed anyway, trusting the warning, preparing for weather that hadn't arrived yet but would arrive tomorrow when tomorrow me experienced it and reported it today. This continued through the night. Every traffic condition, every road hazard, every delay reported in advance by tomorrow me experiencing them and somehow broadcasting backward in time to warn today me. The CB radio had become a temporal communication device, carrying information from future to present, allowing me to navigate based on conditions that hadn't occurred yet, but would occur predictably enough that warnings were useful. Other drivers noticed. Night Rider, this is Big John on your 6. You called that construction zone before we hit it. You called that accident before we saw it. How are you getting such accurate traffic intel? I'm receiving future broadcasts. Tomorrow's traffic reports coming through today. Silence on the channel. Then, you mean like predictions? Like weather forecasting? No. Actual reports from tomorrow me driving this same route 24 hours from now, describing conditions he's currently experiencing, transmitted backward through time somehow. More silence. Then a different voice. That's impossible. CB radio doesn't work backward through time. Mine does, apparently. I've been hearing my own voice give traffic reports for conditions that don't exist yet but will exist tomorrow. Every warning has been accurate so far. The phenomenon attracted attention. Other drivers started monitoring my channel, listening to my future self's broadcasts, using my temporal traffic reports to navigate more efficiently. Night Rider, this is Westbound Willie. Your future reports are saving everyone time. Keep broadcasting. This is valuable intel. But the reports were getting disturbing. Tomorrow me wasn't just describing traffic anymore. He was describing other things, personal things, events from his day that I hadn't experienced yet. Night Rider here, still upset about the argument with dispatch about the late delivery. Still angry about the speeding ticket at mile marker 203, still thinking about the driver I saw die at the rest area near mile marker 227. These were events from tomorrow that I hadn't experienced yet. The argument I'd apparently have with dispatch, the speeding ticket I'd apparently receive, the death I'd apparently witness. All future events being described by future me as if they were present, transmitted backward for today me to hear and dread and anticipate. Night Rider, are you hearing this? Big John asked over the CB. Your future self is describing some dark stuff. A death at a rest area? What's he talking about? I don't know. I haven't experienced it yet, but I will tomorrow apparently. 24 hours from now, I'll witness someone die at a rest area. And tomorrow me is already upset about it, already processing the trauma, already broadcasting emotional response to events that from my perspective haven't occurred yet. The temporal broadcasts continued, growing more disturbing. Tomorrow me was deteriorating psychologically, his reports becoming less about traffic and more about personal crisis. I can't get the image out of my head, the way he looked, the way he stopped moving. I should have helped. I should have called for help faster. I keep replaying it. I keep seeing it. I can't sleep. I can't stop thinking about it. I was listening to my own future mental breakdown, hearing myself process trauma I hadn't experienced yet, receiving emotional broadcasts from a version of me that had lived through something terrible and was falling apart psychologically while driving the same route I was driving today. "Night Rider, you need to stop," Big John said, concern clear in his voice. "Your future self sounds like he's in crisis. Sounds like he needs help. If you're going to experience something that traumatic tomorrow, maybe you should change your route. Avoid whatever's going to happen." "How?" "The warnings are about tomorrow's drive. I'm currently on today's drive. I can't avoid something that happens tomorrow unless I know specifically what causes it, when it occurs, how to prevent it. Future me provided that information eventually. Why did I stop at that rest area? Why didn't I keep driving? If I'd skipped it, I wouldn't have seen him, wouldn't have witnessed it, wouldn't have this image burned into my memory. Mile marker 227 rest area, that's where it happened. That's where everything went wrong. I was currently at mile marker 201. The rest area was 26 miles ahead. I could avoid it, could skip that stop, could prevent tomorrow me's trauma by not stopping where future me had stopped and witnessed whatever death had broken him, psychologically. But would that work? If I avoided the rest area today, would tomorrow still contain the traumatic event? Or would my evasion today mean tomorrow's timeline was different, that the warning was incorrect because the future had changed based on my response to information from that future? The temporal mechanics were confusing, paradoxical. I was receiving warnings about tomorrow, acting on those warnings today. But my actions today should affect tomorrow, should change the future, should make the warnings inaccurate if I successfully avoided the warned conditions. Unless the warnings were inevitable. Unless the events described were fixed points that would occur regardless of foreknowledge. Unless tomorrow me's broadcasts were describing a future that couldn't be changed, only experienced differently based on preparation. I approached mile marker 227, tired, needing rest, considering stopping at the rest area. My CB radio was silent now. Future me had stopped broadcasting, either having reached his destination or having broken down completely. The last transmission had been 20 minutes ago. I can't drive anymore. I have to stop. I have to process this. I can't keep moving forward like nothing happened. I passed the rest area without stopping, making the deliberate choice to avoid tomorrow me's trauma location. Continued north, pushing through fatigue, determined not to witness whatever death had destroyed future me's mental state. But 15 miles later, I had to stop. Exhaustion was making me dangerous, making my driving impaired. I pulled into a different rest area, mile marker 242, planning to sleep for a few hours before continuing. The parking lot had an ambulance, lights flashing, paramedics working on someone lying on the pavement. A driver had collapsed, heart attack probably, surrounded by emergency responders. I watched from my truck, saw them try CPR, saw them use the defibrillator, saw them eventually stop trying and cover the body with a sheet. I'd witnessed a death, just like tomorrow me had warned. Except I'd avoided mile marker 227 rest area, had stopped somewhere different, and had still ended up witnessing someone die. The warning had been accurate even though I'd changed the specific location. The trauma was inevitable regardless of which rest area I stopped at, because the warning wasn't about location. It was about timing, about the moment when I'd be tired enough to need rest, about the coincidence that would put me in a rest area at the same time someone had a fatal medical emergency. Tomorrow arrived. I continued my route, reached the locations tomorrow me had described, experienced the conditions future me had warned about. Everything was accurate: the traffic, the delays, the weather, and the death. I'd witnessed it just as warned, just not at the specific location future me had mentioned, because I'd avoided that location, which had caused me to stop at a different location where the inevitable coincidence had occurred anyway. My CB radio started broadcasting again, but now it was receiving reports from 2 days future me, describing my drive that would occur in 48 hours. And that version of me was even more psychologically damaged, still processing the death, still replaying the image, still falling apart mentally while driving and broadcasting his breakdown backward in time. I can't stop seeing it, can't stop thinking about it. Every rest area reminds me, every parked truck, every driver standing in a parking lot, I keep expecting them to collapse. Keep watching for the signs, keep replaying the moment when he stopped moving and I realized he was dead, and there was nothing anyone could do. I was listening to my own future, hearing myself deteriorate across multiple days, receiving broadcasts from increasingly damaged versions of myself, all experiencing the same trauma at different temporal distances from the initial event. Today, me. Tomorrow, me. 2 days from now, me. All of us connected through temporal CB broadcasts, all of us processing the same death, all of us falling apart gradually. The broadcasts continue. I'm currently 3 weeks past the initial event, still receiving reports from future versions of myself, still hearing my own voice describe conditions days or weeks ahead, still processing trauma that future me keeps revisiting and retransmitting backward through time. The CB radio that only receives tomorrow's traffic has become my personal hell, a device that forces me to pre-experience my own psychological decline, to hear myself fall apart before I've fully fallen apart, to anticipate my own mental deterioration through broadcasts from future versions that are already deeper into crisis than current me, but not as deep as even more future me, who's also broadcasting backward through some kind of temporal relay. Other drivers still monitor my channel, still use my future traffic reports to navigate efficiently. But they've stopped acknowledging the personal broadcasts, stopped commenting on my obvious psychological decline, stopped trying to help, because how do you help someone who's experiencing trauma in multiple time frames simultaneously? Who's receiving reports from their own future mental breakdown while still trying to function in their present? The CB radio continues transmitting. Future me continues broadcasting. The traffic reports are still accurate, the trauma is still present, and I'm still driving, still listening to my own voice describe conditions I haven't experienced yet, still anticipating my own continued deterioration, still receiving warnings about tomorrow and next week and next month when future versions of me will still be driving, still broadcasting, still processing the death I witnessed at a rest area, still falling apart psychologically while transmitting reports backward to earlier versions of myself who are also falling apart but not as completely yet. The CB radio that only receives tomorrow's traffic has made tomorrow inescapable, made future trauma present reality, made mental decline something I experience in advance through broadcasts from versions of myself that have already lived through what I'm about to experience. And there's no way to turn it off, no way to stop receiving future broadcasts, no way to avoid hearing my own voice describe my own continued deterioration across multiple timelines, all converging toward the same endpoint. Complete psychological collapse transmitted backward through time so that every version of me experiences every other version's trauma simultaneously and continuously, forever. Story 8. The warehouse that rearranges itself while you're not looking. The loading dock at the Baltimore Distribution Center had Bay 7 marked clearly when I backed in at 6:23 a.m. on December 12, 2024. But when I climbed out and walked around to check my trailer position, I was at Bay 12 instead. The building having shifted somehow during the 30 seconds between parking and exiting my cab, doors and dock numbers rearranging themselves silently while I wasn't observing them directly, creating an architecture that changed configuration when not actively watched. My name is Stephen Crawford, and I spent 14 hours trapped in that warehouse trying to complete a simple cargo pickup, watching the building rearrange itself every time I looked away, bay numbers changing, corridors relocating, entire sections of the facility shifting position when my attention was directed elsewhere, creating a labyrinth that reorganized continuously, making navigation impossible, making completion impossible, making escape nearly impossible. The dock worker didn't notice anything unusual. "You're at Bay 12. Your paperwork says Bay 7. You need to reposition." I backed into Bay 7. I watched the number. I was at 7. "You're at 12 now, see?" He pointed at the clearly marked bay number above my trailer. "That's 12. 7 is over there." He pointed down the row where Bay 7 was now visible, 5 doors away from where it had been, or where I'd thought it had been, when I'd backed in. I repositioned to Bay 7, which took 15 minutes of maneuvering. The dock worker directed me, hand signals guiding me into position. "Perfect. Bay 7. Now we can start loading." But when I walked into the warehouse to sign paperwork, I glanced back through the open dock door and saw my truck at Bay 19, the numbers having rearranged again, the building having reshuffled its configuration while my back was turned, relocating my vehicle to a completely different position without any visible motion or mechanical process. My truck moved. "It's at Bay 19 now, not 7. The dock worker checked. "You're at 7. Look." And he was right. My truck was at Bay 7 when we both looked at it together. But I'd just seen it at 19. The warehouse had changed when our attention was divided, had rearranged itself back to the expected configuration when we both looked simultaneously. The building was reactive to observation. When watched, it maintained expected configuration. When not watched, when attention was directed elsewhere or divided, it rearranged itself, changed its layout, shifted elements around. But the changes only occurred when nobody was looking. When all observers were watching, the warehouse behaved normally, stayed in standard configuration, acted like a normal building. This made loading extremely difficult. The dock workers would stage cargo at one location. I'd turn away to check something, turn back and find the cargo relocated to a different area. Aisles would extend or contract depending on whether I was looking directly at them. Corridors would curve differently when approached from different directions or at different times. "Has anyone else noticed the building rearranging itself?" I asked a dock worker who was loading pallets onto my trailer. "Rearranging itself? What do you mean?" "Changing configuration, bay numbers moving, corridors shifting, everything reorganizing when nobody's watching." He looked at me like I was exhausted or delusional. "Building stays pretty stable. Been working here 8 years, it's always been the same layout. You feeling okay? Maybe you need some coffee." Either he couldn't perceive the changes or he'd worked there long enough to consider them normal, unremarkable, just the way the building functioned. But for me, coming from outside, the constant rearrangement was disorienting, making simple tasks complicated, turning a routine pickup into a nightmarish navigation challenge. The loading process took 6 hours instead of the usual one. Every pallet had to be tracked carefully because they'd relocate if left unattended. Cargo staged at the dock would be in completely different positions minutes later when I returned from checking something else. The warehouse was playing a game, constantly reorganizing, forcing us to adapt continuously to changing configuration. And the changes were getting more dramatic. Initially just dock bays rearranging. But now entire sections of the warehouse were shifting. I'd walk down a corridor toward restrooms, turn a corner, find myself in the loading area again. I'd follow signs toward the exit, end up deeper in the warehouse instead. The building was restructuring its layout more aggressively now, creating more significant displacements, making navigation actively difficult rather than just mildly confusing. Other drivers were there, some looking frustrated, some looking resigned, all dealing with the same issues. One trucker had been trying to leave for 3 hours but kept ending up back at the loading docks no matter which exit he followed. Another had lost track of her truck entirely, the building having relocated it to some bay she couldn't find despite searching systematically through all numbered positions. "This place is a maze," one driver told me. "It changes every time you're not looking. You have to maintain constant visual contact with important things or they'll relocate. Your truck, your cargo, even people. If you look away too long, they'll be in different positions when you look back." I tested this. Told a dock worker to stay in specific position, then looked away for 5 seconds, looked back. He'd moved, not walked, moved, to a position 20 feet away. When I asked him about it, he was confused. "I've been standing here the whole time. I didn't move." But he had moved. The building had moved him, or moved the floor he was standing on, or moved space itself so that his position relative to other objects had changed even though from his perspective he'd remained stationary. The warehouse wasn't just rearranging its architecture, it was rearranging everything within it, relocating objects and people when they weren't being observed. I finished loading eventually. All pallets secured, paperwork completed, ready to depart. But finding the exit proved nearly impossible. Every corridor led back to loading areas. Every door opened to different sections of the warehouse instead of outside. The building was keeping me in, preventing departure, forcing me to navigate an ever-changing labyrinth that reorganized faster than I could map it. A warehouse supervisor noticed my difficulty. "Leaving? Exits this way." He led me down a corridor I'd tried 3 times already. This time it terminated at an actual exit door, daylight visible beyond. "Just maintain visual contact with the exit while you walk toward it. If you look away, the corridor might rearrange and the exit might relocate. Keep your eyes on the door." I walked toward the exit, maintaining constant visual focus, refusing to look away even when I heard sounds suggesting the corridor was changing around me. The exit stayed in position through force of continuous observation, my attention keeping it anchored, preventing the warehouse from moving it elsewhere. I reached the door, pushed through to outside, found myself in the parking lot, but not where I'd expected. My truck was visible about 200 yards away in a completely different position than I'd parked it. The warehouse exterior had rearranged too, relocating the exit I'd used, putting me out in a different location than I'd entered. I walked quickly toward my truck, refusing to look back at the warehouse. Heard sounds behind me suggesting the building was reshuffling its exterior configuration, changing its architecture now that I was outside and not observing it directly. When I finally reached my truck and climbed in, I glanced back at the warehouse in my mirrors. It looked completely different shape, different loading dock arrangement, different entrance positions. Nothing matched what I remembered from arrival. I started my engine and drove away fast, not waiting for the warehouse to reorganize and trap me again. Past other buildings in the industrial park, all of them looking normal, static, well-behaved. Only the Baltimore Distribution Center exhibited the impossible rearrangement behavior, the reactive architecture, the observation-dependent configuration. Other drivers report similar experiences at that facility. A warehouse that changes when not watched, that rearranges continuously, that makes loading and departure difficult through constant reorganization. Most avoid it now, refusing loads that require pickups from that location, not wanting to spend hours navigating a labyrinth that restructures faster than it can be learned. The company that operates the warehouse denies any unusual properties. They claim it's standard architecture, fixed layout, normal building. But drivers know better. Drivers who've spent hours there, who've watched dock bays renumber themselves, who've seen corridors curve differently when approached from different directions. We know the building is reactive, observation-dependent, constantly reorganizing when nobody's watching directly. The warehouse that rearranges itself while you're not looking is still operating. Still accepting deliveries and pickups, still trapping drivers in ever-changing layouts, still relocating trucks and cargo and people through spatial reorganization that occurs in unobserved moments. Still making simple logistics complicated through architecture that won't stay still, through buildings that shift when attention is divided, through facilities that exist in multiple configurations simultaneously and choose which configuration to display based on whether they're being observed. I got out eventually, after 14 hours, with cargo that relocated 3 times during transport to my trailer, with my truck relocated to different bays half a dozen times, with my sanity tested by architecture that refused to obey basic principles of buildings staying in fixed positions and maintaining consistent layouts. The warehouse is still there, still changing, still rearranging, still waiting for the next driver who backs into Bay 7 and finds themselves at Bay 12 when they're not looking. Still creating labyrinths from standard industrial space through observation-reactive architecture that exists in superposition until observed and collapses into different configurations each time attention is directed elsewhere. Don't look away. Don't divide your attention. Don't assume the building will stay configured the way you remember. Because the warehouse that rearranges itself while you're not looking never stops rearranging, never maintains configuration for long, never behaves like normal buildings that have the courtesy to remain in fixed positions when people need to navigate through them. Story 9. The driver who sees his own accidents before they happen. The semi-truck jackknifed across 3 lanes appeared in my vision at 9:47 a.m. on January 18, 2025, blocking I-40 westbound near Oklahoma City with perfect clarity and detail. The specific damage pattern on the trailer, the skid marks on asphalt, the emergency vehicles with their lights flashing, even the digital timestamp on the accident scene showing 10:23 a.m. I was watching an accident that hadn't occurred yet, seeing my own future collision 36 minutes before it would happen, receiving detailed preview of catastrophe I was currently driving toward at 68 miles per hour. My name is Leonard Washington, and I've been seeing my own accidents before they happen for 3 weeks now, watching future collisions play out in my vision like video overlays superimposed on present reality. Receiving advance warning of every crash, every collision, every loss of control event that my driving will cause over the next 30 to 60 minutes. Complete visual previews of disasters I'm heading toward with enough detail to recognize the locations and conditions, but not enough advance warning to fully prevent them, because seeing the future doesn't change the factors creating that future, and sometimes seeing what's coming just makes the arrival at that moment even more terrifying. The vision lasted 17 seconds, showing me the jackknife from multiple angles. External view of my truck losing traction on an oil patch, trailer swinging out, taking over all lanes, secondary collisions as other vehicles couldn't stop in time. Then the vision faded, leaving me driving normally on clear, dry interstate with no indication that in 36 minutes this entire section of highway would be disaster scene. I'd learned the pattern by now. The visions were accurate. Every accident I'd seen preview had occurred exactly as shown, at the exact time indicated, with the exact consequences predicted. Trying to prevent them was difficult because the visions didn't show causes clearly enough to avoid them. I'd see myself crash but not see what made me crash. I'd see the result but not the specific trigger that created that result. This time the vision had shown oil patch on road surface. That was my trigger. If I could identify the oil patch before reaching it, slow down appropriately, navigate carefully, I might avoid the jackknife. might prevent the future I'd just witnessed. I reduced speed to 55, scanning the road ahead carefully, watching for any surface anomaly that might indicate leaked fluid. Other drivers passed me, annoyed by my slow pace in the middle lane. My hazards went on, foot ready to brake carefully if I spotted the hazard. Mile marker 137, time 10:11 a.m. 12 minutes until the predicted accident. Still no sign of oil patch. Road surface appeared clean, dry, normal. Maybe I'd avoided it by slowing down, by maintaining defensive position, by being hypervigilant based on the vision's warning. Mile marker 139. Time, 10:18 a.m. 5 minutes until predicted accident. Still nothing unusual visible. I started believing I'd successfully prevented the future, changed the timeline, made the vision incorrect through preemptive action. Then I saw the oil. Not a patch, a streak fresh and wet across all 3 lanes, impossible to avoid without stopping completely or changing direction so radically I'd lose control anyway. The vision hadn't shown me clearly enough, hadn't warned me about the distribution pattern, hadn't prepared me for how sudden and unavoidable the hazard would be. I tried braking carefully, tried maintaining control through the slick, but I was carrying 43,000 pounds and the trailer had momentum that didn't stop just because the tractor was losing traction. I felt the skid beginning, felt the trailer starting to swing, felt control leaving my hands as physics took over and the jackknife started developing exactly as the vision had shown. The accident occurred at 10:23 a.m., precisely when predicted. My trailer swung across 3 lanes exactly as foreseen. Secondary collisions happened exactly as previewed. The only difference was that I'd spent 36 minutes anticipating this moment, watching the future approach second by second, knowing what was coming but unable to fully prevent it. Emergency vehicles arrived. Paramedics checked me, bruised but functional. Highway patrol took statements. Insurance investigators documented everything. And throughout the process, I kept having more visions, more future accidents, more previews of collisions I'd cause after recovering from this one. The next vision showed me in a different truck 3 weeks from now, rear-ending a stopped vehicle at a traffic light, the impact hard enough to cause whiplash injuries and total my tractor. The timestamp showed February 8th, 2:47 p.m. I was watching my post-recovery accident, seeing my return to driving end in failure, previewing the next disaster before I'd even finished processing the current one. "You okay?" the paramedic asked, noticing my expression. "I'm seeing the next accident, the one I'll cause 3 weeks from now. It's already playing in my vision like a video. You're probably experiencing shock. Trauma from the current accident creating anxiety about future driving. That's normal after collisions. But it wasn't anxiety. It was actual vision of actual future, complete with specific details I couldn't fabricate. Exact intersection, exact vehicles, exact lighting conditions, exact timestamp. I was seeing February 8th from January 18th, receiving preview of collision I hadn't caused yet but would cause inevitably because the visions were never wrong. Were always accurate, were always precognitive glimpses of disasters I was destined to create. The visions had started 3 weeks ago after I'd crossed through a construction zone on I-40 near Little Rock. Nothing dramatic about the crossing. Just standard traffic control, reduced lanes, workers present. But something in that zone had affected me, had given me this ability or curse of seeing future accidents before they happened, of receiving preview footage of disasters I'd cause, of watching my own failures before I failed. Since then, every accident I'd seen in vision had occurred exactly as shown. I'd witnessed 7 collisions before they happened, had tried preventing all of them, had failed every time because seeing the future didn't provide enough information to change it. The visions showed results but not causes, showed disasters but not the specific factors creating them, showed me crashing but not why I crashed or how to avoid crashing. I was released from the hospital after evaluation, my truck totaled, my cargo transferred to another driver. The company suspended me pending accident investigation but would likely let me return to driving once the review was complete and I was medically cleared. But I knew what would happen when I returned. The visions had shown me, February 8th, different truck, traffic light collision, the next accident in my series, the next disaster I'd cause, the next preview that would play out exactly as foreseen because the visions were never wrong and changing the future was impossible even with advance warning. I tried not driving. Took a month off after the Oklahoma accident, stayed home, avoided trucks entirely. The visions stopped during that time. No previews of accidents because I wasn't driving, wasn't creating future disasters, wasn't putting myself in positions where collisions could occur. But I needed income, needed to work, needed to return to trucking because that was my skill, my career, my livelihood. So I accepted a new assignment, got behind the wheel of a different truck, started a route from Memphis to Dallas. The vision came immediately, same content as before. February 8th traffic light collision, now with updated details showing me in this new truck on this new route, causing this predicted accident in exactly 13 days. The preview played again, showing me the collision I hadn't caused yet but would cause inevitably because that was what the visions showed and the visions were always accurate. I drove carefully, hypervigilant, defensive to the point of being overly cautious. Other drivers complained about my slow speeds, my excessive following distances, my tendency to brake early and avoid any situation that might create collision. But the careful driving didn't prevent the visions from coming. Each day brought new preview footage of the February 8th accident, now closer, now more imminent, now approaching at the inevitable rate of 1 day per day. February 8th arrived. I tried not driving that day, called in sick, stayed off the roads, avoided the traffic light where the collision was supposed to occur. If I wasn't there, the accident couldn't happen. The vision would be wrong for the first time, but the company needed urgent delivery. Called me despite my sick day, offered double rate for emergency transport, needed someone immediately. I was the only driver available. Please, they begged, just this one load, just this one day. It's critical. I accepted because refusing would mean losing the job, and losing the job would mean no income. And no income was worse than the risk of causing the accident the visions predicted. I drove the emergency load following the route that took me through the intersection where the traffic light collision was supposed to occur. 2:47 p.m., the exact time from the vision. I approached the traffic light carefully, maintaining extreme distance from the vehicle ahead, ready to stop early and avoid any possibility of rear-ending them. The light was green. I prepared to continue through. Then a vehicle ran the red light from the cross street, forcing me to brake hard. My load shifted, weight distribution changing, causing my trailer to push forward against my tractor. My brakes weren't enough to stop the momentum. I rear-ended the vehicle ahead of me exactly as the vision had shown at exactly 2:47 p.m. on February 8th, exactly as predicted 3 weeks earlier. The collision was minor, bumper damage, whiplash for the other driver, no injuries to me. But it was exactly as foreseen. The visions had been accurate again. Seeing the future hadn't prevented it. Knowing what was coming hadn't changed what came. The preview had been prophecy, and prophecy fulfilled inevitably regardless of actions taken to avoid it. The visions continue. I'm currently seeing accidents scheduled for March through June. Every collision I'll cause, every disaster I'll create, every failure waiting in my future. All previewed in perfect detail with exact timestamps. All playing like video footage overlaid on my current reality. All warning me about crashes I can't prevent even though I know they're coming. I'm still driving because I need income. Still operating trucks despite knowing I'll cause more accidents. Still seeing previews of disasters and driving toward them anyway, because not driving means not working and not working means not surviving. The visions have made me a more cautious driver but haven't prevented accidents because the futures shown are inevitable, written, determined, approaching at fixed rate regardless of foreknowledge. The next major collision is scheduled for March 23rd on I-10 in Texas. Multi-vehicle pileup. My fault. I've seen it dozens of times already, the vision replaying daily, showing me the approach, the loss of control, the cascading collisions, the injuries to other drivers. I have 33 days to anticipate it, to dread it, to approach it knowing exactly what will happen but unable to fully prevent it because the visions show results without showing preventable causes. The driver who sees his own accidents before they happen is still driving, still causing collisions, still receiving preview footage of disasters approaching in his timeline. The visions continue. The accidents continue. The future keeps arriving exactly as foreseen. And there's no way to change it, no way to prevent it, no way to avoid the accidents that the visions show because seeing the future doesn't grant power to alter it. It just grants the torture of knowing what's coming while being unable to stop it from coming, of watching disaster approach second by second while being powerless to change trajectory, of living through accidents twice, once in preview and once in reality, suffering double trauma from single event experienced first as vision, then as actuality. Story 10. The inspection checklist that keeps adding items. The pre-trip inspection checklist showed 23 items when I started my routine walk-around at 5:47 a.m. on February 14, 2025. Standard DOT requirements covering tires, lights, brakes, coupling, and all the mechanical elements requiring verification before legal operation. But when I completed item 7 and looked back at the clipboard, the list showed 41 items now, additional requirements having appeared spontaneously, new inspection points manifesting between glances, the checklist growing, expanding, adding impossible elements like verify quantum stability of cargo space and confirm temporal coherence of driver's consciousness that weren't part of any legitimate safety protocol. My name is Daniel Foster, and I spent 19 hours trying to complete a pre-trip inspection that wouldn't stop growing, checking items endlessly while new requirements kept appearing faster than I could verify existing ones, the checklist becoming infinite, the inspection becoming impossible, trapping me in a loop where completion was permanently out of reach because the list added items faster than I could check them off, creating a task that had no ending. No conclusion, no state of completion that would allow me to legally depart. I tried ignoring the new items, focusing only on the original 23 standard requirements. But when I attempted to start my truck after completing those, the engine wouldn't engage. Some kind of electronic interlock tied to the checklist, preventing operation until all listed items were verified, including the impossible ones, the nonsensical ones, the ones that had appeared spontaneously and made no mechanical sense. Verify quantum stability of cargo space. How do you verify that? What equipment do you use? What constitutes passing versus failing that inspection point? I stared at the requirement, completely confused about what it demanded. I walked back to my trailer, examining the cargo space carefully. It looked normal. Standard empty trailer, metal walls, wooden floor, proper dimensions. Nothing obviously quantum or unstable. I wrote verified next to that item on the checklist, hoping the system would accept my confirmation even though I had no idea what I was actually verifying. Looked back at the list. Now showing 63 items. 22 new requirements had appeared while I was checking the cargo space, including measure driver's future probability fields, confirm absence of temporal parasites in fuel system, verify that trailer exists in only one timeline, and other completely impossible inspection points. This was insane. Checklists don't grow spontaneously. Inspection requirements don't manifest from nowhere. Something was wrong with this list. Something that violated normal reality. Something that made completion impossible through infinite expansion. I tried calling dispatch, explaining the situation. My checklist keeps growing. Started at 23 items, now showing 63. It's adding impossible requirements that I can't actually verify. What's impossible about them? They're just inspection points. Things like quantum stability and temporal coherence. Things that aren't part of normal mechanical inspection. Long silence. Then, those items are standard now. New federal requirements. You need to complete all items before you can legally operate. If you can't verify the quantum and temporal items, you need specialized equipment. What specialized equipment? It's in your truck. Check the storage compartment under your sleeper berth. You should have quantum scanner and temporal analyzer. They're mandatory equipment as of January 1st this year. I found the devices. Strange-looking equipment I'd never seen before, displaying interfaces I didn't understand, measuring properties I didn't know how to interpret. They looked like someone had built measuring devices for science fiction concepts, equipment that shouldn't exist because the things they measured shouldn't be measurable. But they worked. The quantum scanner pointed at my cargo space showed readings labeled stability index and probability coherence that both registered in green zones. I recorded the values on the checklist, marking that item complete. Looked back at the list, now showing 97 items. 34 new requirements added while I was using the quantum scanner, including increasingly bizarre inspection points. Verify driver's shadow has proper attachment. Confirm cargo hasn't been replaced with alternate timeline version. Measure synchronization between truck's position and driver's perception of truck's position. This was never going to end. The list grew faster than I could complete items. For every requirement I verified, 3 new ones appeared. The checklist was designed to be infinite, to expand perpetually, to prevent completion permanently. Other drivers were in the parking lot, all doing their pre-trip inspections, all looking frustrated and confused. One driver was working through what looked like a 500-item checklist, pages and pages of requirements, many of them completely nonsensical. Another driver had given up, sitting in his cab with engine off, staring at a checklist that had apparently grown beyond any possibility of completion. "How long have you been working on your inspection?" I asked the driver with the 500-item list. 36 hours. Started yesterday morning. Every time I finish a page, 3 more pages appear. I've checked hundreds of items. I've verified things that shouldn't be verifiable, but the list keeps growing. I can't complete it. I can't start my truck. I can't leave. "Why don't you just abandon it? Walk away? This is insane." I tried. My truck won't release. Some kind of electronic hold tied to the incomplete checklist. I'm trapped here until I complete the inspection or until the company sends someone to override the system. But the company says I have to complete the inspection. They say all items are mandatory federal requirements. They say refusing to complete them is violation of operating standards. I looked at my own checklist, now showing 143 items. It had grown by 46 items while I was talking to the other driver. The list was accelerating, adding requirements faster as time passed, approaching some kind of exponential growth where completion became mathematically impossible. Items were getting more disturbing too. Verify that driver is original driver and not replacement from parallel timeline. Confirm truck's physical laws match consensus reality. Measure how many timeline branches driver has created through past decisions. Verify that driver's memories are real and not implanted. These weren't safety inspections anymore. These were existential verifications, philosophical confirmations, requirements that questioned basic reality rather than mechanical condition. and I was supposed to verify them all, confirm them all, check them off one by one while new ones kept appearing. I worked through them anyway, had no choice, used the strange equipment, made observations I didn't understand, recorded values that meant nothing to me. Each item I completed allowed the system to add 3 more items. Each verification I made opened space for additional requirements. The list grew exponentially. 143, 217, 341, 529, 821. Hour 12, I was working through over 1,000 items. Most were duplicates with slight variations. Verify tire pressure front left. Verify tire pressure front left in primary timeline. Verify tire pressure front left in all active timeline branches. The system was finding infinite ways to ask the same questions, creating variants that technically counted as separate items, expanding the list through semantic multiplication. Hour 16, I'd completed over 3,000 items and the list showed over 6,000 remaining. I was losing ground. Completion was moving further away despite continuous work. I was falling behind in a race I'd already lost, checking items in a list that would never end. I tried deliberate sabotage, marked items as failed, hoping that would trigger some kind of exception process, some override that would free me from the infinite inspection. But failing items just added more items to address the failures. Schedule repair for failed component, verify repair completion, confirm repaired component meets original specifications, test repaired component under various load conditions. Every failure created 5 new inspection requirements. The system turned problems into additional work, transformed deficiencies into multiplication factors. I couldn't escape through failure. I could only continue through completion. That was impossible. Hour 19, I stopped trying. Put down the clipboard, the quantum scanner, the temporal analyzer. Sat in my cab and accepted that I was trapped here, that the checklist had won, that completion was impossible and departure would never occur. My truck's interlock system sent automatic notification to dispatch. Driver has abandoned pre-trip inspection with 8,447 items remaining incomplete. Vehicle held. Driver cannot proceed. Dispatch called me. Daniel, you need to complete your inspection. You're behind schedule. The delivery is time sensitive. The checklist is infinite. It adds items faster than I can complete them. I've been working for 19 hours and I've lost ground. This inspection will never be complete. All drivers complete their inspections. You need to work faster. Use more efficient verification methods. Prioritize critical items. But you must complete the full checklist before you can operate. Other drivers have completed these infinite checklists. Every driver completes their pre-trip inspection. It's mandatory. It's federal law. Refusing to complete it is violation of operating standards that will result in termination and license suspension. I looked at the other drivers in the parking lot. Most were still working through their checklists, still verifying items, still using the strange equipment to measure impossible properties. But a few trucks were departing, pulling out onto the highway, apparently having completed their inspections somehow. One driver walked past my truck. I flagged him down. How did you finish your checklist? You don't finish it, you just accept it. Stop resisting the process. Stop questioning the requirements. Just verify whatever it asks. Confirm whatever it demands. Check off items mechanically without thinking about whether they make sense. The list stops growing when you stop caring about what it's asking. It feeds on your confusion and resistance. It grows when you question it. Accept it completely and it stabilizes at completable length. I tried his approach. Stopped reading items carefully. Stopped trying to understand what I was verifying. Just scanned the checklist, marked things complete, moved through items mechanically without engaging my critical thinking. Verified, confirmed, complete, checked, verified. The checklist stopped growing. stabilized at 8,947 items, still enormous but no longer expanding. I worked through remaining items methodically, no longer questioning, no longer resisting, just checking boxes until the list was complete. 26 hours after starting, I finished the final item. The interlock released. My engine started. I was cleared to depart, but I was changed. The infinite checklist had trained me to accept without questioning, to verify without understanding, to complete tasks mechanically without engaging my judgment. I'd been reprogrammed through the inspection process, conditioned to stop resisting impossible requirements, taught to check boxes rather than think critically. Other drivers report similar experiences now. Pre-trip inspections that grow infinitely if resisted, that expand exponentially when questioned, that only become completable when accepted mindlessly. The checklists are training mechanisms, conditioning systems designed to eliminate critical thinking and install automatic compliance. The inspection checklist that keeps adding items is standard now. Every driver encounters it. Every pre-trip inspection has potential to become infinite, and every driver learns the same lesson. Accept without questioning, verify without understanding, complete mechanically without engaging judgment, or be trapped forever in inspection that never ends. I complete my pre-trip inspections quickly now. Don't read items carefully, don't question requirements. Just verify everything automatically, confirm everything mechanically, check off items without thinking about what they're asking. The lists stay short when I don't resist. They don't grow when I don't question. But I've stopped being a thinking driver. I've become an automatic driver, someone who complies without considering, who checks boxes without evaluating, who follows procedures without questioning their validity or purpose. The infinite checklist accomplished its goal. It didn't just inspect my truck, it inspected me, tested me, modified me, and I passed its test by surrendering my critical thinking, by accepting that some requirements don't need to make sense. That verification is more important than understanding. That completion matters more than comprehension. The checklist keeps adding items for drivers who resist. For drivers who accept, it stays completable, and we all learn eventually to accept, to verify without understanding, to become automatic rather than thoughtful, compliant rather than critical. The inspection checklist has trained us, all of us, one impossible requirement at a time. Until we stopped questioning, until we stopped thinking, until we just checked boxes and drove away, changed but mobile, compliant but certified, approved to operate as long as we never again question what we're being asked to verify.